Hello everyone, we are back again for our next drawing project prompt. I have my usual suspects, tools, eraser, charcoal, various sort of drawing materials. Anything will do. So we have been playing now with some of our basic shapes, the circle, our square friend, and our triangular friend. And then each of these shapes has variations. The circle becomes a sphere. Then our circle can also become an egg shape. And then this shape also suggests something about ellipses. Okay, so that is the sort of breakdown for our circle and expanding on its shape identity. Then we have the square, and that can become the cube. It can also become a rectangular shape. And that rectangular shape can also become a three-dimensional object. Then we have our triangle shape, and the variations of our triangle shape can become a pyramid, or it can become a cone. A cone-like shape, a three-dimensional shape. And there are variations on this triangle, any kind of triangle. Obtuse, acute, 90 degrees, any of these, isosceles, any of these funky, cool triangle names falls under that triangular definition. And we have been playing with value and light, so creating a sense of dark, medium, and light tones in our work to help create a sense of shadow and also to describe a plane or some three-dimensionality in our shapes. However we do that. So we've been talking about all of these shapes, and we also actually have talked about our composition, how that can also be broken down. These first four lines, this picture plane that we work in, can also be broken down in a circular manner. Let's see, let's get rid of this stuff. In a circular manner, the circle can be our dominant sort of compositional structure. The things that we place in our picture planes can be arranged in a circular way. And that doesn't just include the overall circle. It could be sort of circular on the edge of a piece. Stuff can be arranged in a circular manner so that it has this sense of a circular or radial movement. Then we have our square shape, and we can break up our picture plane in dominantly square rectangular ways. As I've said in the past, if I have my picture plane, my composition, and I put a tree in my composition, I have broken down this picture plane into square and rectangular shapes. Even if this element, if this is a boat or just an abstract figure or an actual person, where this is located, its vertical notion and its horizontal notion breaks up the space in such a way that creates a square or rectangular composition. And then we can break up our picture plane into more of a triangular shape. However you decide, it doesn't have to be the whole thing. It could be a section of the piece can be broken up in a more triangular fashion. And it's not just, not literally these lines, but where we place things. If we're working abstractly or if we're working with realism, how we place these elements on the page defines how we break up the picture plane. All right, so we have been playing with these shapes with disregard for perspective. Perspective is how we see things in space, how things are positioned, and it has to do with the horizon line. So let's imagine that we have a horizon line in our picture plane. So we have the top and the bottom, a horizon line. And now let's put a square or a cube in our picture. Now perspective tells us this is the sight of our horizon line, our sight line. Let's say this is our sort of point of perspective. Our eyes lead in that direction. This would make it so that all of these points would be seen in this perspective. You take all of these lines right back to that perspective point. We don't need all of these lines, but to know that these lines would converge to that one point. And if all of a sudden we take our horizon line and we move it, it now no longer makes any sense, these lines converging back to this horizon line. This is our horizon line. Maybe we'd have to do something quite wild to get it to work. Maybe we wouldn't even see the top of the cube for it to move back in space where this horizon line would be. Let's see. Again, let's put the horizon line somewhere, and let's talk about a sort of rectangular shape. Let's put the line of sight back here, one point. These lines would converge to this point in our picture plane. This is going to give us the true perspective, as if we're sort of looking out in space, looking out at the world, our horizon line and our line of sight, how we see things in this world. There is a sort of system. As you can see, that helps create a huge amount of space and some sense of reality. Again, we wouldn't need these lines, but to know that these lines would converge to that point of perspective. With our horizon line here, and this can go into being a sort of house shape. This could be suggestive of a house shape. This line would also converge. The roof would converge to that line in space. So you can see it helps create a sense of perspective and space. And this also is adhered to lots of different shapes. So we just did a cube and a rectangular shape. So let's talk about more of let's talk about a circular shape or a bowl. So let's see. If I have a bowl sitting on the table, and this is the edge of the table, and let's say my point of perspective is like I'm over here and I'm looking at the bowl. It goes back into space. It would come to this point. I'm looking at the bowl from this direction. So let's see. I'll just suggest a bowl. I'm just making this up now. So what do we see already in this bowl? We have a sphere happening, and it's often good to think about things in their wholeness before we start breaking them down. So if I had a bowl here, thinking about it as a sphere is going to help me sort of create it in space. You also want to take it a step further. If we could imagine that this was a rectangular or square-like shape, this is going to help us, remember these lines of convergence, these converging lines here. This is going to help me now place my ellipse in the proper place within this cube-esque top, this plane. I can now see this bowl in perspective, moving back in space. Now I wouldn't need all of these lines. Just the lines that would help me get the bowl shape. Again, just thinking about that, how would that move back in the space? And still, even at this point, let's think about a light source. Let's say there's a light source coming down from this angle. How would that hit this object in this space? So the light would be coming down right on the top here, be pretty light here. Remember that idea that the space around a lit area would be darker. And then this object over here would be dark. And then into our middle tones. And it would probably be a little bit darker than the top here because it's turning away. If we think about that cube-like shape, if this was a cube here, this would be a plane that moves away from the light. So maybe this would be light here. Maybe there'd be a reflected light here. And you could include a shadow. Again, thinking about our shadow as also having a darkest point. That reflected light, boom, light hits over here, boom, it hits the object, boom. It's also going to have a little bit of reflected light in that space, in that shadow. So maybe it lightens up just so right here, and then gets darker as it moves away. And then the outside of that shadow, because it's moving from being hidden, covered, it's blocking the light, this object, creating this shadow, but then as it moves closer to the light, it's going to lighten up. It's going to blend. The blocked light and the actual light are going to blend, so it'd probably be lighter around the edge of the shadow. So that would create a nice illusion of the space. And again, these lines don't have to be here for light. Those are just markings to guide us, to help remind us where the light is coming from. And maybe there's a spoon on the table. So let's think, this is our point of perspective. Maybe we have a little spoon that would move. It's hidden by the bowl, but the lines would converge to that point. Maybe there's a cup on the table. Maybe it goes up past the horizon line. Again, that sphere. That circle can also be kind of converged, mix the rectangle and the sphere together, we get this cylindrical shape, like the shape of a cup or a vase. Sort of get rid of this, and then maybe this is that point of conversion. Maybe we'd only see just a little bit of the tip of that cup. Maybe there was some milk or something in that cup. Again, to get that convergence line, that ellipse would follow that perspective, that point. Okay, so we have light here coming here. Maybe this would be dark. And who knows, if this was glass, there would be all kinds of highlights and reflected light within this object. And maybe a shadow. And even if, let's say this is our morning table here, we've got our cereal, our spoon, or our cup of milk or whatever it is. If this table, let's imagine this table had a pattern on it. Pattern. So again, if this is our point of perspective there, you can imagine that these lines would be converging out throughout this entire piece to keep moving this point of perspective throughout this entire piece. So if there was any patterning on this table here, they would follow suit with this perspective. If I had a series of, if there was a series of, let's just say, polka dots, again, just like the ellipse here, we're seeing it from its side. Ooh, blush me. And as we'd see them move back in space, they would get smaller, but they would follow this line of perspective, these lines of perspective, as they moved through this picture plane. We'd see them in perspective to this point of view. Let's see, and as things move away from us, they get smaller, so I'm trying to play with that idea. And if this actually was a tablecloth, this would, some of these things in shadow would end up also being darker or lighter. All right, so you didn't know that even just your morning breakfast has an entire landscape of possibility in regards to drawing. And these simple shapes that we have been talking about actually adhere to everything in the world. Everything that we see can be broken down into these basic shapes that we have been playing with. So let's see. We've made this perspective line very, very far away, so this must be a very large table. If someone else was sitting on the table, they'd probably be way out here. All right, so today we are talking about perspective, sort of thinking about our shapes, our circle, square, and triangle in perspective. What happens when we add, and this is, a bowl, a table, but let's keep this point right here. Let's say there's a little house out here. Why not? Remember those lines of perspective here. Maybe the bottom of the house is here. See how I'm following these lines, this point of perspective here. Following these lines. Say that was this is the front of the little house. Now, once we get past this horizon line, these lines now converge out. So all these lines move out, 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 out. This is how we'd see everything. So these lines would now, they would not bend in this angle, they would bend in this angle. So maybe that's where, or actually we could make this even more. So this line here, oh, I said a house, but maybe this is a milk container or something. Let's see this line of convergence. We'd see this up higher, this move over. All right, so seeing our basic shapes in perspective, playing with putting them in a space that says something about the perspective, the space that we're in, the environment that we're in, not just frivolously, but with a real sense of depth and space.